Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This is the continuation of Swallow the Stars. This will be part 33, chapter 33, entitled Family. By this point in time, 2 years into knowing Izuku, Hitoshi is used to cooking in the Aizawa household. Usually it's after-school snack, sometimes it's Saturday morning breakfast, but ultimately, it's not a new thing. He knows where the dishes are, knows how the refrigerator is organized, knows that this early in the evening the coffee pot has to be turned on alongside the electric kettle. This is Hitoshi's second home, and Aizawa-san has already made sure that he felt welcome. He is not, however, used to cooking alongside Todoroki, who doesn't seem to know what to do with himself inside of a strange apartment, with a big orange cat winding between his ankles. "Quit getting distracted by the cats, or I'm going to be kicking you out of the kitchen," he threatens with a flick to Todoroki's ear. Sorry, Endeavor never allowed us to have pets." Todoroki snaps his eyes away from Leo, though, and stares at Hitoshi with determination. "Don't kick me out. I want to help." "Great." Hitoshi shoves a handful of vegetables into Todoroki's arms and then points at the sink. "Wash these and then cut them. I'm working on the chicken, and the rice has already started." Hitoshi turns his head so that he can raise his voice. "Aizawa-san, is Hisashi-san joining us?" "Yeah," Aizawa-san calls back. "Cool." He turns back toward Todoroki and nudges Leo out of the kitchen with the side of his foot. "We're cooking for 5, then. Go ahead and use all the vegetables. You do know how to cut them, right?" Todoroki nods. "I help my sister with meals most nights. I'm not a chef, but I know what I'm doing." Hitoshi decides to take his word for it and leaves Todoroki to handle the vegetables. It's kind of hard to fuck up washing and cutting them. Hell, he's pretty sure even Izuku can do that, though Hitoshi has never seen him try. For 5 minutes, Hitoshi and Todoroki work silently together, each tackling their own responsibilities. Sounds drift in from the living room, the news playing at a low volume on the television, Izuku telling off Leo for being too rowdy, Aizawa-san making a low comment on the assignment he's grading. It feels normal. Like last week never happened, like the revelations from earlier this afternoon have already been washed away. It's Todoroki who breaks the quiet in the kitchen. "You seem at home here," he says, though he doesn't take his eyes off the vegetables in front of him. Hitoshi shrugs even though Todoroki can't see him. "I've been coming here every Friday and Saturday for the last 2 years now," he says quietly. "And some days in between. Izuku befriended me on the first day of our second year of middle school, and both Aizawa-san and Hisashi-san have been taking care of me since." "Does Yamada-sensei live here?" "Don't let him catch you with the sensei after school hours." Hitoshi snorts, but he leans back against the counter as the chicken cooks. "But no, he doesn't. He lives nearby, though. I've only ever been to his apartment a few times, but he comes over here for dinner frequently, since he helped with Izuku in my training." Todoroki nods, but his shoulders are stiff, and he glances over at Hitoshi and then quickly away. Hitoshi sighs. "If you have a question, just ask. We're friends, aren't we?" "Are we?" Todoroki stops cutting and turns around to look at Hitoshi properly. "I don't. Izuku just told me that we were friends. I don't actually know the first thing about making a new one." "Damn, okay, so this is something Hitoshi has to fix, then." "Yeah, Todoroki, we're friends. You heated up my coffee, and you helped Izuku during the break-in on campus. We're friends, no takebacks." Todoroki smiles, smaller than anything even Aizawa-san had ever offered, and ducks his head in either shyness or an informal bow. "Okay, friends then. I do have more questions." Hitoshi waves him on and turns around to check on the chicken. "Do you not have a good home either?" Todoroki asks, more blunt than he has been for the last couple of hours. But aside from the brief pause and flipping over the chicken, Hitoshi doesn't react. "No, I have a good home. My dad works a lot as a nurse because his quirk lets him take long shifts. My mom runs the therapy clinic, so she's the one who's always home in the mornings and evenings, and my siblings are all fine." He risks a glance to his side. "Why do you ask?" "You said that Aizawa-san and Yamada-san have been taking care of you. I assumed that meant that you didn't have good parents." Todoroki shrugs, and even from behind he looks a little helpless. God, Izuku's so much better at dealing with people than Hitoshi is. Izuku collects friends through sheer force of will, just saying that they're friends now and moving on as if it's a truth of the universe. Hitoshi isn't like that. He has Izuku, who's now more than a friend, and Kirishima decided that they were friends after the entrance exam, and because Kirishima's friends with Kaminari and Ashido, Hitoshi supposes that he's friends with them too. Todoroki's his friend now, but only because Hitoshi had to declare it so. He's not good at this. "I just mean that they're good people," Hitoshi says, as earnestly as he can. "Aizawa-san offered to train me, and he did. Hisashi-san would often either bring takeout or cook for us after our trainings, and He always made sure to include me in conversations early on, when I was still learning where I fit in with all of them. He sighs and walks over to share space with Todoroki, grabbing his own knife so that they can cut vegetables side by side. They don't have any ulterior motives, I guess. They're just genuinely nice. And even though I didn't come into their lives really needing parental support, they provided it anyway because that's just how they are. Hizashi-san helped with our English homework. Aizawa-san asked the first day if I had any food allergies so that he could avoid those foods if I did. He shrugs. They're just good, and they don't expect anything from their kindness. Todoroki doesn't say anything for a long while, just rhythmically cutting the vegetables and making sure to stay firmly on his side of the cutting board. Their elbows don't even touch, even though they should from this close together. But Hitoshi doesn't mind. He's only ever seeking physical contact from Izuku, really, and if Todoroki wants his space, then Hitoshi can give it to him. When Hitoshi returns to check on the progress of the chicken, Todoroki says, I guess I'm just not used to the concept of having people looking out for me. None of this feels real. Yeah, I bet. Hitoshi glances into the living room and checks the time before he decides to make Aizawa-san another cup of coffee. By the time he's done with that, Todoroki has finished the vegetables, and they work on adding them to a pan. Hitoshi decides to let Todoroki cook them. It's just vegetables, after all. Even if they end up charred or rubbery, they'll still be edible. Hizashi-san walks through the door just as the food is about to be done. Ooh, smells good! He leans around the corner and smiles first at Hitoshi, then at Todoroki. What's for dinner? Curry, Hitoshi says as he gets plates down. Can you shake those two out of their trances and tell them to wash up? He nods toward the living room, where Aizawa-san is still grumbling over grading, while Izuku had progressed to writing in a notebook. Sure thing. Hizashi-san smiles brightly and walks into the living room. Hitoshi watches for a moment as Hizashi-san tosses his jacket at Aizawa-san and ruffles Izuku's hair and laughs to himself as he starts plating dinner. He nudges his elbow into Todoroki's arm. Hey, relax. Hizashi-san is great. I know. Todoroki seems to come out of whatever memory or emotion he'd been stuck in because his shoulders relax, and he shifts his weight from one foot to the other. He's my favorite teacher. Really? Yes, why? Hitoshi shrugs. You're so quiet, I thought you'd prefer someone less noisy. He passes a plate to Todoroki, who sets it down at the table in front of one of the chairs. Endeavor's house is very quiet, unless he's yelling at me during training. Yamada-san is loud, but it's a nice kind of loud, if that makes sense. Todoroki takes the next plate that Hitoshi passes to him and sets it down too. It does make sense when Todoroki puts it like that, even though Hitoshi often finds himself with the opposite problem. His home is loud. Haruki is young and rambunctious. Ryota listens to loud music and doesn't always wear headphones. And lately, Maki had been on the phone more often than not, setting up appointments or applying to university. It's a loving household, but it's a lot. Here, though, Hitoshi finds peace. Izuku can talk Hitoshi's ear off if he wants to, but he always knows when Hitoshi needs quiet. Aizawa-san, Hizashi-san, and Izuku all know JSL, so they're unbothered if Hitoshi wants to be nonverbal for a while. And the cats are always accepting of cuddles and impromptu naps. This apartment is his refuge. So he can understand, in a somewhat mirrored way, why Todoroki would gravitate towards someone who's loud, with their joy and who doesn't anger easily. Izuku shuffles into the kitchen first, walking up to Hitoshi to peer around his arm at the mostly empty pot of curry. Can I try some? He asks. Hitoshi elbows him away. No. Yours is on the table already. Go sit. Mean, Toshi. Izuku sticks out his tongue, a teasing light in his eyes as he dances away and takes a seat at the table. Todoroki-kun, come sit by me. Izuku, Aizawa-san calls from further in the apartment. I'm going into your room to grab your desk chair. That's fine, Dad. Izuku pats the chair on his right, smiles at Todoroki. Come on, sit down. Do you want Hitoshi to sit on your other side? Todoroki looks a little panicked by the choices in an unfamiliar household, so Hitoshi takes pity on him. Go sit. I'll take your other side, so don't worry about it. After some shuffling around to fit the fifth chair at the table, they all dig in. The vegetables are good, to Hitoshi's pleasant surprise, and he had gotten the spice level right in the sweet spot between Izuku's desire for spicy food and Hizashi-san's distaste of anything too hot. So, Hizashi-san says once everyone's a few bites in. How did the meeting with Nezu go? Todoroki glances quickly at Aizawa-san. You told him? Hey, whoa there, listener. Hizashi-san holds up a hand. Shota didn't tell me any details, just that you guys had to leave to have a conversation that Nezu had ended up joining. I just want to make sure everything's all right. He offers a smile that Todoroki doesn't return, but he doesn't seem as defensive anymore either. Izuku pats his hand against Todoroki's wrist. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but Hisashi will listen. Todoroki sighs and dips his head. I know. My apologies. This is all just a lot. No worries, listener. Hisashi-san assures with a smile. Don't feel pressured, okay? For a while, silence overtakes the table. Aizawa-san, sitting directly on Izuku's left, taps Izuku's arm and signs to him, but Hitoshi looks away and lets that conversation be private. But the silence has to crack at some point. Hitoshi's just surprised that, for the second time this evening, Todoroki's the one to do it. Nezu is making me a ward of UA, he says, voice quiet as he glances up at Hisashi-san and then down to his half-finished curry. My father. He spits the word out like bile. Likens kindness to weakness, and violence to training. Izuku noticed. Aizawa-san said he'd help, and he did. He looks up at Hisashi-san again, but this time he holds his gaze. I think the meeting with Nezu went rather well, all things considered. Hisashi-san blinks, digesting the information, then smiles. It's warm and soft, fatherly. That's good to hear, kiddo. I'm glad you're getting out of that. This is an endeavor-hating family, I can promise you that. He laughs lightly and scoops up some curry and rice. Any idea which teacher's taking you in? Todoroki shakes his head slowly. Nezu said he is going to ask around. Aizawa-san is letting me stay here until someone volunteers. With a quiet hum, Hisashi-san tilts his head to the side, taps his finger against his chin. You know, I've got my foster license, got a room set up already and everything. If you don't mind music and hanging out with these three for half the week, you're welcome to stay with me. Izuku starts vibrating, which, honestly, Hitoshi had expected to happen. Oh my god, Todoroki, we be brothers. But you're Aizawa-san's son. Todoroki looks at Izuku and then Aizawa-san, and Hitoshi can't see his expression, but God, he wishes he could. I'm Hisashi's son, too. They're both my legal guardians. Izuku beams. Todoroki-kun, we be brothers. He repeats as if the first time wasn't shocking enough for the other boy, but Hitoshi doesn't say anything about it because he's not the people person, and Izuku has never been wrong about how he's talked to Todoroki before. Still, it seems like Todoroki doesn't know how to say yes to something he clearly wants, so Hitoshi decides to throw him a bone. Todoroki, he says, nudging the other boy with his elbow. You're allowed to have a home that you feel comfortable in. He'd already admitted to Hisashi-san being his favorite teacher, someone he finds comfort in even when Hisashi-san is neck-deep in his arguably annoying hero persona. Hitoshi thinks that it'll be a good place for him. That finally seems to settle into Todoroki's understanding. He squares his shoulders and dips his head in a bow when he faces Hisashi-san. Please take care of me. Hisashi-san cheers loud enough that Aizawa-san flashes his quirk for a second. I'm going to text Nezu right now. Hisashi, we're eating, Aizawa-san says. Right now, Hisashi-san repeats, phone already in his hands. A moment later it chimes, and Hisashi-san lights up with excitement and turns the phone around for everyone at the table to see. I call dibs on Todoroki. I figured you might. I'll have the paperwork on your desk in the morning. Izuku laughs loud and bright and perfect and grips Todoroki's hand, and Todoroki is crying. Just a few silent tears dripping down his cheeks with a tiny hesitant smile to greet them. Welcome to the family, Hitoshi teases, and Todoroki has the audacity to be completely deadpan when he says, Thank you for having me. After he cleans up dinner, which only happened after physically pushing Todoroki out of the kitchen and insisting he does not need or want the help, Izuku wanders into the living room and just stands on the edge for a moment. Hitoshi's on the floor with Koko, settled in his lap, and Leo chasing after the feathered cat wand in his hand. Aizawa sitting in the chair, alternating between focusing on his grading and watching Leo with a bemused expression. And Hisashi and Todoroki are on the sofa, facing each other while they talk. Well, really it seemed that Hisashi is talking and Todoroki's listening, but there's a pleasant expression on Todoroki's face that Izuku hasn't seen before. He looks content. Happy. It's a good look on him. After all that shit that happened at the USJ, this is exactly the kind of news that they all need. Todoroki put his trust in adults, and those adults actually managed to help him, and now Todoroki gets to move away from his abusive asshole of a father and live with probably the nicest, most sincere man Izuku's ever met. And they get to be brothers. How fucking cool is that? Izuku hasn't had a sibling since before they all started dying. Ridding his head of that terrible thought, Izuku walks quietly across the room and taps Aizawa on the shoulder. When Aizawa looks up at him, one eyebrow raised in question, Izuku brings his hands up to sign. Can we talk? Either on the balcony out loud or in one of the bedrooms with sign. Aizawa sets aside his grading and nods. Which would you prefer? He asks, also signing. Izuku thinks through the options. Sign in a bedroom would be more private, not risk of anyone actually around to eavesdrop, no risk of a neighbor having their window open and listening in, but talking on the balcony would allow Izuku to keep his whole family within his sights, which, after everything that's happened and the conversation he wants to have, is a high priority for him at the moment. Balcony, he signs, and then steps back to give Aizawa room to stand up. Izuku catches Hitoshi's eye and says, "We're just going to be out there for a bit. You can come get us if you need to." But Hitoshi just waves him away with the cat wand, which sends Leo skittering across the floor after the feather tied to the end. "Take your time, I'm not going anywhere." Izuku nods and turns to follow Aizawa outside, after sending a small smile Todoroki's way. The sliding door closes behind them, cutting off the majority of the sounds from inside. Hizashi's voice is still audible, but it's just tone and volume, not actual words. Izuku sits down on the metal of the balcony, and after a moment, Aizawa mirrors his position. "What do you need to talk about, kid?" Aizawa asks, tone soft, not pressing for information, but allowing him into a place to relax and talk at his own pace. Izuku hums and looks down at where his hands are resting in his lap, palms covered by his gloves. Amahaki is quiet in the spaces between his ribs, moving slightly but not in a way that's painful or even really noticeable, without Izuku looking for it. He's not sure how he's feeling about Amahaki right now, not after the USJ incident, not after adding more depth to his unfortunately high body count, but it's also unfair for him to take out his feelings on the god. Sure, it's not Izuku's power, but every decision he made that day was his own. But that's not what he wants to talk about. He'll sort out his misgivings about the god in his own time, hopefully before the sports festival, but definitely soon. Izuku knows that he's stuck with his power, that the only thing that can free him and Amahaki from each other is Izuku's death. So he'll adapt, he'll get over it, or move past it, or compartmentalize it, and just not think about it. "I wanted to tell you about this sooner," he says, finally bringing his eyes back up to his dad. "But last week was busy." Aizawa snores. "Yeah, that's one way to put it." Izuku smiles, and it's small, but it's not forced or fake. "Bakugo and I had a conversation on Tuesday about what he said to me on orientation day, that he knew me when we were kids." He tugs at his fingers, and then thinks better of it and starts tapping out rhythms with his thumbs and fingertips. "I don't remember him, even after all the memories I got back after the kidnapping. Even after all the static that Amahaki had to put in place around things I didn't want to think about. Even after all that cleared up. I don't remember being that young. He said I was 4, I think, when I went missing. Presumed dead." Izuku inhales sharply and looks away, between the railings of the balcony and out over the sprawling city beyond. A hand settles on his knee, grounding and warm, and Izuku uses that point of contact to fortify himself. "He said that his parents take him to my grave every year, mine and my mother's. I didn't ask how or when she died. I don't want to know, I don't think." He looks back at his dad, who's watching him carefully, expression painfully neutral as Izuku talks. "I believe him, though. Bakugo is loud and abrasive, but I don't think he's a liar. He said there's a picture of me in his home, and that he recognized me by my freckles. He's smart, I believe him." There's something so inexplicably sad about thinking of a life that Izuku could have had, a life that started normal, that started with a mother and a best friend, with preschool and playgrounds and bedtime stories. It's a life that Izuku used to have, something that was actually once within his grasp. But he remembers none of it. Instead, his memories are filled with white walls and sterile rooms, with distant screams and inhuman noises that shook the doors on their hinges, with doctors in white coats and children who ate their meals silently and then disappeared into their rooms. He doesn't remember going for ice cream, or playing pretend, or making friends. He just remembers pain and nightmares and blood that never stopped flowing. "I don't want to know who she was, who I was," Izuku says, and he means it. He thinks if he had solid memories of those 4 years, which is unlikely because memory at that age is fickle and threadbare most of the time, it would break him. "But if you do, or if Tsukuchi-san does. Bakugo said my name back then was Midori Izuku. I think it's uncommon enough as a surname that at least a cause of death from a mother could be found." He casts his gaze back inside, watching through the glass door as Hitoshi gets up and moves down the hall toward the bedrooms and the bathroom, watching as Hizashi returns from the kitchen with 2 mugs, one of which he passes over to Todoroki. Aizawa shifts closer, and Izuku turns to him in time to look at and accept the hand moving toward his head. He leans into the touch, letting out a slow breath as Aizawa carts his fingers through Izuku's curls. The motion is soothing and familiar, and Izuku could get lost in it easily. You really don't want to know? Aizawa asks quietly, not judgmental, but just reaffirming and making sure. Izuku shakes his head. I really don't. I have a family. I have you. I don't... He sighs. Maybe this is cruel, but I don't want to tie myself to a corpse when I don't even have memories of her. She may have given birth to me, but I don't think I have room in my life for her. You are my parent. Hizashi's my parent. I don't need to dig up a grave to know whose son I am or where I belong. I'm okay right here. Okay, Aizawa says, moving his hand to cup the back of Izuku's head and pull him forward into a loose hug. I'm going to look into it, or at least pass it off to Tsukuchi to check out. I don't know if there's even a case running anymore, but he might want the information anyway. With a quick kiss to Izuku's temple, Aizawa pulls back and holds Izuku up by the shoulders. I hope you know how much I love you, and how proud of you I am. Izuku does know, but it makes him feel warm to hear Aizawa say it. I love you too, he says with his biggest, sunniest smile. I want to stay out here for a while longer. Will you stay with me? For as long as you want. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 33 of Swallow the Stars. Chapter 34 is next, which is the entirety of the sports festival, so it'll be a longer chapter. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic. Let me know your thoughts and reactions, and as always, thank you so much for listening.